Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's kick off this video with a wild workplace showdown where a stubborn customer meets an even more stubborn cashier. You think you've seen commitment to customer service? Just wait until you hear how OP handled this one. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Customer yells at me to lift heavy box, instantly regrets it. I've been working at a chain grocery store for almost 2 years, and this happened June of 2019, but I only remembered yesterday talking to my mom about working as a cashier. I thought this would be a funny story to share here. At the time, I was a full-time cashier and well-liked by my coworkers and most customers. I'm known at work for being goofy, and I usually have a good story. I dislocated my shoulder the first time at work, but it wasn't a full dislocation, so I just tucked it in my apron and carried on one-handed. I'm nearly as fast one-handed as two. The next day, I finished the job by reaching too far around something and it popped out and I had to push it back in. After that, it came out a few times and I just put it back. This became pretty normal, so it isn't nearly as painful now, but still not fun. So this day I was on till and warned my boss I dislocated it again at home and would have to be careful with it, but I can still do my job. She knows me well enough that she isn't all that worried about me. A lady and her husband put their things on the belt, one of which is a big box of chicken breasts that I knew I shouldn't try to lift. I started ringing in their items and tried to make pleasant conversation. She was ignoring me and her husband was taking a phone call. I just continued thinking they were preoccupied. When I finally got to the box, I said, "I'm sorry, miss, but I hurt my arm and can't lift the box of chicken breast. I've already—" She cut me off before I could finish. "Just do your job," she snapped. I tried to explain what had happened, but she kept arguing. Apparently, one of the other cashiers heard what was going on and called my boss down from the office. She came to the till next to me and asked, "Is there a problem here?" "Yes, your cashier is refusing to do her job. Tell her to do her job. I'm not paying for her to be lazy and ask me to do her job. Okay, lady?" My boss started talking about how she needs to not talk to her staff like that, and she tried explaining why I can't lift it. I turned to my boss and said, "It's fine. Watch this." I turned back to the customer and smiled. I picked up the box in kind of a weird angle to make sure I dislocate it and put the box on the other side of the till. I looked her dead in the eye, resting my elbow on the register, lined it up and put it back in with the other hand. It made a loud pop sound. She turned white and walked out of the store, I assumed to vomit or hide, but her husband stayed. I didn't even notice that he finished his call just before I lifted the box. He came over and asked if I was all right. I said I was fine and asked how he was paying with a big grin on my face. He paid and left smiling pretty big himself. I have a funny feeling this is a pretty regular occurrence for her. Probably should have got work to pay for the medical on that initial dislocation. You want to get that fixed. Joints aren't supposed to just dislocate. It does damage every time it happens. And our second story. Our dad left us $600K. Our uncle spent it all and lied to us for a decade. My father was paralyzed from the waist down after a botched back surgery in the late 90s. I was just a toddler at the time. After a lawsuit with the hospital, he was awarded a significant amount of money. He worked hard to manage the funds, and when he passed in June 2011, he left my sister and me just over $600,000 to split between us. I was 16 and my sister was 19. My uncle was named as the trustee and for all intents and purposes became our guardian. At the time, he told us the money was in an account that would be released to my sister and me when we turned 18 and 21 years old. No big deal. We believed him as our dad trusted him. From there, things went south. A few years passed and we'd moved out of my uncle's house. My sister lived with our mom and I lived with a girlfriend. We struggled constantly, working hard to build our own lives and even tried to ask my uncle for assistance, but every time he'd make us feel guilty or mentally abusive. He would tell us that he was taking unauthorized withdrawals from the account and that he was getting in trouble with the financial institution. Well, we'd reached the ages when the money was supposed to be released and we were met with, "No, you were mistaken," or "You misunderstood. The money wouldn't be released until I was 21 and my sister was 24. Again, we believed him. He was our dad's brother, and we never dared second-guess him for fear of further mental abuse. He would tell my sister he had bought a gun because he didn't want to deal with the pressure of this anymore. He tore our minds to shreds with guilt, making us feel like we were greedy and ungrateful. We felt like it was blood money. Fast forward a few more years, and I turned 21 and my sister turned 24. When we reached out to him, he again tried to tell us we were mistaken and that the ages were actually 27 and 30. By this point, we knew he was lying. It took months to get the name of the financial institution from him. When we finally reached out to them, we learned it was an institution owned by a friend of my father and uncle. We also found out that there was only about $40,000 left in the account. Most of the money had been drained to cover years of alleged unpaid taxes, and my dad's money had been released to us almost right away after his passing. We'd shifted our faith into the institution, thinking it was a professional operation and that they would know what to do. They alleged to have no knowledge of what my uncle had done. When we asked them what options we had, they told us to use this as a learning experience. As a 21-year-old kid, I took that as gospel. What did I know? This man was a professional, so he must know what he was talking about. That was in 2016. Shortly after, we learned from an old family friend that my uncle had a long history of addiction, gambling, and spending money irresponsibly, but none of it made sense. Early on, we spoke with some local lawyers about filing a lawsuit against my uncle, but by this time, he had squandered the money and ruined his own life in the process. A lawsuit against him would have been pointless. I'm 27 now, and I've mostly forgotten about all this. I built a life of my own, got married, have dogs and a home, but that money still lingers in my mind. I have very little expectation of ever seeing any of it again, especially considering how much time has passed. But it's been hard for me to let go of, and I've been struggling with depression and guilt over it. I felt sick even thinking about it. But lately, I can't shake it from my mind. If you were able to sue your uncle and win, would you have any hope of ever collecting any money? If not, the best idea is unfortunately to just let this go. And our next story. Didn't work at Target, got pulled into a staff meeting anyway. At least lunch was free. This happened to me a couple years back. I was down in Georgia camping for a spring vacation and happened to be wearing a nice red polo shirt and wandered into Target to pick up a few gifts for my family back up in Canada. While perusing the back shelves, a harried-looking Target manager runs up to me and tells me to get in the back. I try to tell him, "Hey, I don't work here," and he interrupts me with a, "I don't care what you're doing, get in the back," and basically dragged me into the back area and over to one of the office conference rooms for a presentation from a regional exec. There were a lot of people in that office, and it seemed like that Target had called in everyone who would normally be off shift into the office for this meeting. So they had a lot of people that some managers had never interacted with before. I'm guessing that's why I got dragged in. It was very obvious to me that anyone I made eye contact with knew I didn't work there, since they were all laughing at my bewildered "WTF am I doing here" look and my wearing the wrong pants. Then the exec rolled in and ran an hour-long presentation about some variety of performance metrics, some new fast business action plan, or something that I tuned right out. I probably could have left if I actually made a real effort, but it would have caused a stink and definitely made the store look inept in front of their big boss, and I'm not that much of an a-hole. Also, the meeting was catered, so I took advantage of the free lunch. After it was done, we all filed out. I headed off to buy my purchases, and the cashier glanced at my shirt and gave me the employee discount. Edit. Just to clarify, I was being Canadian when I said I was dragged. The manager didn't physically drag me in, he glared at me and kept telling me to hurry up, and so I was bound by social convention to follow him and see whatever hilarity this was going to lead to. I would have asked questions about the presentation, asked about the driving forces behind the new plan, profit, employee retention. Will the upcoming raises be announced today or next week? Changes in upper management? What were the root causes of the last plan's failures? And who did the analysis? And our last story. Neighbors thought my pool was a public amenity. They were wrong. I live in a neighborhood with a beautiful tree canopy that starts right in front of my house. The city allows it as long as the trees are maintained, which I do religiously. My next-door neighbors don't have any trees, but they like to park their car under mine for the shade. Fine by me. Until things took a turn. A storm rolled through recently, and a heavy branch fell onto their car. The next day, they knocked on my door demanding my car insurance info. I explained that this type of damage falls under my homeowner's insurance and gave them the necessary details. I even started the claim process on my end, but they kept insisting on car insurance despite my explanation. The next few days were a circus. They repeatedly knocked, called, and even ambushed me in my driveway, asking if I had heard anything. I told them to contact the insurance adjuster directly, even gave them the number, but they never responded to his calls. Instead, they kept badgering me like I was personally supposed to write them a check. Around the same time, I scheduled a tree removal service. I asked them to move their car beforehand, which they did, but not without sulking about it. Then things got weirder. I'd been out of town for a few days. When I returned, something was off. There were wet footprints leading from my backyard gate to my driveway. My pool skimmer was in a different spot, and the pool toys that I never used were scattered around. That's when it hit me. Someone had been using my pool. I checked my security cameras, and sure enough, my neighbors and their kid had been sneaking into my backyard and treating my pool like a community water park. The dad even had the audacity to bring a pool float. So I did what any rational person would do. I locked the gate, reinforced my fence, and made it clear they were not welcome. Not surprisingly, they didn't take it well. The kids started throwing things over the fence, flip-flops, plastic cups, even a small soccer ball. I initially returned them by leaving them on their porch, but the next day they were thrown back over one by one. Then it escalated. I caught the dad trying to shake my fence, probably testing if it was weak enough to climb. I watched in disbelief as he straight up tried to lift the latch on my gate while his kid egged him on. At that point, I sent them a formal warning via text and email stating that they were trespassing and that I would take legal action if they continued. No response. Instead, they banged on my door, yelling that I owed them for the storm damage. Owed them for what? Providing free shade? Having a pool they decided was a public resource? Update. Well, I knew they were entitled, but I didn't think they were this stupid. A couple nights after I reinforced my fence, I woke up to the sound of splashing at 2 a.m. I checked my security cameras, and guess who it was? The same neighbors in my pool again. The dad was lounging on a float, drink in hand, while the kid did cannonballs off the steps in my backyard in the middle of the night. I didn't even hesitate. I called the cops immediately. When the police arrived, the neighbors acted shocked, as if they had no idea why they were being confronted. They claimed they didn't think I would mind and that it was just a late-night swim on my property. The officers weren't buying it. Trespassing's trespassing. They were forced to leave, and I filed an official complaint. The dad tried to play it off, saying it was just some harmless fun, but the cops made it pretty clear that if they so much as set foot on my property again, they'd be arrested. Since then, they've been giving me the death stare every time we cross paths, but I don't care. If I catch them trespassing again, I won't just call the cops. I'll make sure they learn a lesson they won't forget. Honestly, you handled this way better than most people would. First warning, then reinforcement, then cops. Well played. If they're still giving you death stares, that just means they're salty they got caught. Next time, press full charges. Some people only learn when consequences hit them square in the face. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.